Shay, class of 2025, and his sister Skylar, class of 2027. Please join me in welcoming the Suykerbuyks. Seth has been a student at prep since pre-K, as he says, a very long time. He's been active in this theater since the 7th grade, with roles including Chad in Almost Maine, Max Seth in a play not to be named, and as a wolf right here, Into the Woods, later this spring. He's also a principal member of Prep's Music Club, one of 3 regulars amongst a group of many. Next year, Seth plans to study cybersecurity at Augusta University, start a band, and play a lot of video games. Ladies and gentlemen, Seth Suykerbuyk.
Okay, yeah, this is good. Thank you to Mr. Schaefer for the introduction. I've had a lot of fun in your advisory the last couple of years, and very grateful for all the support you've given me. Thank you to my parents and my sisters for supporting me, no matter how obnoxious I get sometimes. Yeah, I know. And of course, thank you to all my friends and to my class. Thank you guys for making me laugh throughout the years, and I hope to continue to hang out with a lot of you long after we graduate. For my senior speech, after much debating, I settled on talking about the themes of cyberpunk. To start with, what is cyberpunk? Well, according to Wikipedia, cyberpunk is defined as a subgenre of science fiction in a dystopian futuristic setting that tends to focus on a combination of low life and high tech, featuring futuristic technological and scientific achievements such as artificial intelligence and cybernetics, juxtaposed with societal collapse, dystopia, or decay. In more casual terms, cyberpunk boils down to a world where man and machine can become one, while the world around us collapses from corruption and post-war conditions. Maybe you weren't familiar with the term, but I can almost guarantee you've seen these things in some form of entertainment. For people who are avid gamers such as myself, you may have seen elements of this in games like Ghost Runner, Fallout, Deus Ex, and of course, Cyberpunk 2077. If you prefer to watch movies and TV, maybe you've seen it in movies such as Terminator, Judge Dredd, Ready Player One, The Matrix, and shows like Altered Carbon. And for those who like to read, perhaps you've heard of books such as Neuromancer and Snow Crash. And for those who haven't seen, played, or read any of these, I can still guarantee you've seen something considered cyberpunk while browsing for a cool new backdrop for your phone or your computer. In terms of visuals, cyberpunk entails brightly lit metropolitan areas with skyscrapers and flying cars, along with interesting technologies almost everywhere. One example could be holographic projections in the sky of a product being advertised by a corporation. It could also be service robots that seem human-like in their movements, actions, and sometimes speech. If you look to the slide, the image on the left is a screenshot from Blade Runner 2049. You can see a futuristic car, as well as what seems to be a wasteland with no sign of life for miles. These two things showcase the technological advancements of society, and also what most of the world looks like after worsening environmental conditions due to a multitude of reasons. The image on the top right is a screenshot from one of the cutscenes from a game I mentioned earlier, Ghost Runner. Ghost Runner takes place during an unknown year sometime in the distant future. What you see here are 2 things. For one, another apparent wasteland that shows what most of Earth looks like after global nuclear fallout, much like the one in Blade Runner 2049. The second thing you'll notice is the large structure amidst the desolate world. In Ghost Runner, this structure is also known as Dharma Tower, the last safe haven for humans, after the world's collapse. This can represent the remaining habitable spaces on planet Earth in many post-apocalyptic cyberpunk narratives. On the bottom right, we have an image of what looks like a blade of some sort protruding from an arm. This is called a mantis blade, one of the many weapons in the world of Cyberpunk 2077. What makes this unique is the fact that the blade is built into the owner's forearm and can be activated at will. This perfectly captures the cybernetic augmentation ideas of cyberpunk fiction. The availability of tech like this that can be installed in your body is one of the most famous elements of this sci-fi subgenre. Bodily augmentations aren't just limited to weapons, though. They can also be computer displays on your eyes, or increase your strength by replacing bones with stronger substances, such as titanium. For a few years now, cyberpunk has been one of my favorite topics to think and talk about due to the many ways that life can change in the world, similar to some that I've just described. And can also be an interesting playground of philosophy when new technologies surround us everywhere we go. For my senior speech, after much debating, I settled on talking about electric guitar and music. Some of you may know that I've been playing guitar for almost 2 years. Playing guitar has not only been a favorite pastime of mine, but has also gotten me to expand my musical palette to genres that I would have dreamed I would ever like 4 years ago, such as deathcore and pop punk. Music has always been an important part of my daily life, and it always makes me feel good when I find something new I like. While I play both electric and acoustic guitar, the electric guitar will always be my go-to instrument on almost any given day. So naturally, I like to know a bit more about the electric guitar and its use in the music, specifically rock and metal music, two of the genres I listen to the most. Arguably the first rock song ever recorded was Rocket 88 by Jackie Brenston and Ike Turner in 1951. It used the slightly distorted guitar tone, which I'm sure most of you know is a staple feature of rock and roll. Countless bands have used this style of guitar in numerous genres of music since then. Metal music was pioneered, if not invented, in the late 60s by the band Black Sabbath. Some of you may know the name, and for those who don't, perhaps the name Ozzy Osbourne rings a bell. Ozzy Osbourne was one of the lead singers in the band and also had a very successful solo career, especially in the 80s after the release of Crazy Train, which would help spark the satanic panic of the 80s that ended up being the reason that a lot of music albums come with the parental advisory warning label today. Black Sabbath played mostly in standard tuning for the first part of their career, which is something most people wouldn't expect from a self-proclaimed heavy metal band. And standard tuning is exactly what it sounds like, the default tuning that guitars use. Nowadays, most metal and even rock bands use much heavier tunings than standard tuning, which I'll explain more about in a moment. In 1969, the Beatles and Led Zeppelin released 2 songs, I Want You and Moby Dick, respectively. These 2 songs use a tuning called drop D. Before this, most guitars in recorded music were tuned in standard tuning, or E standard. In E standard tuning, the open notes are, starting from the left, E, A, D, G, B, E. Open notes are the sound that a guitar makes when played without pressing on any of the frets on the neck. In drop D tuning, all the open notes are the same except for the low E string, the one furthest to the left, which is tuned down to D, matching the 4th string's tuning. This allows you to play the lower 3 strings on the same fret, creating a heavier sound on the guitar, amongst other techniques. Since then, there's been a lot of heavier tunings used in rock and metal that use the same concept as drop D. One of my favorite examples is drop C. In drop C, the order of the tuning, still starting from the left, goes C, G, C, F, A, D. It's a popular tuning used in metalcore music, which combines the heavy tunings of metal music with the lighter lyrics and melodies from music such as pop punk. Some famous bands who use this tuning are A Day to Remember and System of a Down. The sheer scope of ways to play the guitar in countless different genres and subgenres seems almost overwhelming. However, it does allow me to hone my skills and find new music that I love and will come back to for many years. For my senior speech, after much debating, I settled on talking about the history of video games. Gaming is a hobby that needs no introduction. Since their creation, it's a pastime that's only ever gotten more and more popular. The frontiers the gaming world covers and the plentiful ways to play them that have been created is truly impressive. So let's start at the beginning. Many of you know this already, but one of the first video games ever created was called Pong. It was a simple electronic version of ping pong, and used minimal graphical displays. Nowadays, we play Pong in just an internet browser tab, but in the early 70s, this required a large computer to run. What you see here on the right is a pretty recognizable design. It was the computer that housed Pong, known as an arcade machine. The lower half of the machine is where the actual computer was built. On the right side of the front panel, you can see a coin slot. As was the case with all arcade machines at the time, a certain number of coins were required to play the game. The creators of this game later went on to found the game company known as Atari, the company behind many hit games of the 80s, such as Asteroids and Space Invaders. So gaming was a pretty niche hobby throughout the remainder of the 20th century, often being labeled as an activity for nerds and losers, which it is. I play games, I know. Despite this, the gaming industry chugged right on. Arcades became a culture icon of the 80s, and soon enough, home consoles began production, which would become almost arguably the centerpiece of modern gaming. The first home console ever made was called the Magnavox Odyssey. It utilized a boxy controller that had a couple buttons and 2 dials. Naturally, it was a console very limited in power, and likewise very limited in game library. But it wasn't long before home console saw a consumer craze. The Nintendo Entertainment System, the Atari 7800, and the Sega Genesis are just a few names of consoles mass-produced in the 80s. The NES propelled Nintendo into the gaming scene and helped make it the entertainment giant it is today. Some game franchises that you know today started during the 90s. One famous example of this is Doom. Doom is a game franchise that revolves around violently dismembering and killing demons, and listening to heavy metal music while you do it. In addition to being one of the first first-person shooter video games, it also sparked controversy throughout the world. Most of you probably know that video games have a rating system, similar to movies. This rating system is managed by the ESRB, the Entertainment Service Ratings Board. The ratings go E for everyone, E10 plus for everyone 10 and older, T for teens, M for mature audiences 17 and older, and AO for adults only. Doom was one of the games that resulted in the creation of the ESRB, along with the Mortal Kombat games. Parents were concerned about the levels of violence and gore in these games, especially when the game is in the first-person perspective, as is the case with Doom, for fear that it would desensitize their kids to violence and death. Violence in the original Doom, released in 1993, is nothing anyone would really bat an eye at by today's standards, but with the advancements of computer power and graphic power especially, well, it makes sense why some people would think that while looking at Doom Eternal, released in 2020. There's a lot more stories of video game controversies and a lot more history and how games have changed just in the last 20 years, but we don't have that kind of time to talk about it. No matter what specific aspect of gaming it is, I'll enjoy it. Video games are an important part of my life and have been since I've been able to actually play them. I enjoy talking about them, playing them, and reading about them. I'm always looking forward to the next big thing in the gaming scene, be that a new title or a new medium of play. And I intend to stay in touch with it for as long as I live. Now, I'm sure most of you are confused about what is happening. I've talked about three seemingly unrelated things, and I've given no clear indication as to why. Well, all three of these things play an important part of my life in some way or another. As I said with Cyberpunk, it's a fantastic conversation topic and a fantastic sci-fi subgenre that I will always enjoy in whatever form it comes in. For guitar, I explained that it helped me find something to do aside from play video games and helped me find countless new musical artists I'm a fan of now. For video game history, I just like to play Rainbow Six Siege and sit in my couch for hours. Yeah. While deciding on what I wanted my senior speech to be about, I went back and forth on a lot of topics, some of which are not mentioned in the speech. One day I decided, why not do a little bit of everything? So that's what I did. I talked about bits and pieces of three things that I think make up a lot of who I am in some way or another. Picking one thing over the other in terms of preference is something I've never really been good at. So this made the most sense for me to do, and it was a lot of fun to work on. To the senior class, and to everyone really, having one thing you like doing is great, but having a lot of things you like doing is so much better. So go out there, try new things. Maybe you won't like all of them, but I can say with confidence that you're going to find some hobbies out there that you will pour countless hours into for a very long time. Now before I go, I'd like to do something that combines all three topics: video games, guitar, and music. So, what better way than to play part of a song from a game on the guitar while a driving montage from said game, made by yours truly, plays in the background. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the ending portion of Never Fade Away by Samurai from Cyberpunk 2077. Whoever's on soundboard?
congratulate anonymous